Our operation is located in Ontario. Grey County is a beef producing county in the province. It is supposed to be the county that has the most beef cows in Ontario. And that number keeps diminishing because of the cash crop sector's expansion and with what's happening with land prices. My grandkids are the 7th generation. My dad and I fed cattle, had cow-calf industry and swine operation, and then in 1974 we built our first feedlot. And then since Chris has come home in '97, our feedlot side of the business has expanded substantially compared to where it was in the 70s and 80s. We've grew now to the point where in the peak of the fall, we will have between 9,000 and 10,000 at home here. We have also land in Manitoulin Island, where we take in pasture yearlings, where we have them backgrounded in the west, brought down in the spring, pastured on the island, and then taken and brought home here to finish in the wintertime. We will do about 1,500 yearlings up on the island and then pasture some at home here too. The growth pattern was neighboring farms that come up for sale. Before we built new barns, we were buying farms that had barns on them and houses. We would rent houses, fix the barn up, put a fence line feeder on it, and feed the cattle there. And we had one site where we piled all the feed, which is the home site here, which is still the same. It's the central site, the shop, all the silos, the commodity sheds, the premix room, everything is here. And then it's all divvied up from here with the feed. But everything when it comes here goes over the scale, whether it's grew in the field or whatever. So when we take and look back at when our first feedlot was built in '74, our regulations that we had to deal with when it comes to nutrient management and cemented outside yards and everything, the rules were not as stringent as they are now. In the late '90s, there were some incidences in Ontario. One of them was the Walkerton deal, just some things that took and created bad publicity. Was it the industry's fault? No, but when the press gets involved, they can create a mountain out of a molehill. Nutrient management become a very big issue, and outside cow yards and cement, and a lot of the cattle were lying inside barns, but were eating in outside yards and fence line feeders. With the new rules that come down, it promoted that you should have a roof over the whole area. So that's basically what drove it, was provincial regulations. But it also took and made us manage our manure a lot better. We took and realized the resource that we then had, what that would grow, and without so much affluent mixed into it, whether that be rain or snow from Mother Nature, we then had a product that didn't have all that in it, and it was all under roof. We stored it and we utilized it a whole lot better than we did. So with the rules and regulations, yes, we were ticked off at the time, but I think in the end, it made it a lot more beneficial for our industry and took and presented to the public a better image of what we did with our byproduct.
So with the way there are regulations work in Ontario, we're documenting every load of manure, the texture of manure, the weight of the manure, and where it's applied, what time it's applied. And we have a plan in place that we're forecasting that out 5 years in advance. So we're managing our solid manure a little different than you do with the liquid manure. Our solid manure, a barn like this, we have limited storage on the end of it, approximately a month, 6 weeks worth of manure out there. And then from there, it's moved to the field. If it's the time of the year that you can directly apply it to the field, it's directly applied. Otherwise, we're using temporary field storage where the manure is windrowed in the field that it's to be applied at a later date, typically spring or fall. The liquid manure is all stored underneath the barns. Basically have 240 to 300 days of storage underneath the barn for the liquid manure. We produce about 10 million gallons of liquid manure a year and about 27,000 tons of solid manure per year. Yeah, there's different ways to calculate the value of the manure. It's obviously a huge asset. The liquid manure is much more economical when it comes to transportation costs because it's more dense product. That being said, the solid manure has its own attributes that you're adding actually more organic matter to the soil, but to put a number on that value is a challenge. So where we are here is what we call the home farm. So this is the original Pallister homestead, and so there is some livestock here, as you can see. There's an older bank barn down below. as well as this barn it'll be approximately 16 years old. So there's about 300 head in this upper barn and approximately 175 down the lower barn. All our feed is stored on site here and then mixed on TMRs and delivered to the other sites. So there's actually 10 sites, including this, with cattle on them. There's a lot of older bank barns we're still using and some relatively newer facilities that we're feeding cattle in. So with a variety of barns here, there's certain barns that will strictly only background or start cattle in. And a lot of that is the quality air with bigger cattle, or the facility maybe isn't suitable for heavier cattle. You'll see this barn's a straw pack barn. These are bedded with wheat or barley straw. Manure is taken out every 10 days to 2 weeks and replaced with fresh bedding. We can split the barns that we can have cattle on one side to clean the other side, and vice versa. We usually have our bunks on the east or the south side of a barn, because most of them are on the outer side of this that are somewhat exposed to the elements, but it's not to say we don't get any nasty weather to the east, but it's less out of the east. So we typically have our bunks on the east side or the south facing. And then you can see this is a complete open side. There's no curtains. On the west side and the north, we've got curtains that we can raise and lower depending on the outside weather. Finishing cattle in a straw pack barn like this will be at 30 to 35 square feet per animal. Starting calves, we like to keep that closer to 35 to 40 square feet. And you'll see in the slat barns, when we go up there, they're closer to 25 square feet on slats. So the straw pack barns are all cement flooring. We've tried some different textures, whether it's grooving or just roughing the cement, but you don't want, obviously, that cement very smooth or you can run into issues. So this barn that we're in here now was built in 2003, I guess. It was the first newer facility we built. We actually signed the contract to build it a week before BSE, which, looking back, where I'm glad we did. At the time, we really struggled with the decision to go on, but we did. So as you can see, when you look down the barn, it's split into 4 pens here. So there's approximately 180 cattle in each pen, each one of these 4 pens. You'll see there's a center divide down the center of the barn here, so that when we're cleaning, we can lock the cattle on one side as we clean the other. As well, in that center divide, you can see the waterers where they can drink from either side of that center divide. We are strictly finishing in this barn. We aren't backgrounding in this barn at all, so they're being fed just on the one side. And then we have a processing facility here for doing our final process in this barn as well. You see there's curtains on either side of the barn. They're both manual curtains, so it's just up to the pen checkers when they're checking the cattle every day to kind of monitor the air in the barn and adjust the curtains according to what's going on outside or what's anticipated to happen that day or evening. These barns here used to be all outdoor pens, so I think it was in 2000 we built outside pens here, and then in 2006, 2007 we put up the structures that you see here to keep the cattle under roof. We still have one outside pen here behind us, and then there's an older bank barn here as well. The decision to cover the outdoor pens was basically, it come down to cost. The bedding cost was getting out of hand when there was times we were dumping 50, 60 bales a day. Every day it rained, and there's times in the fall here that it rains 5 out of 7 days. This barn that we're in here now, I guess the overall size of it is 120 by 776. 500 feet of barn here is a slatted floor, and then there's 276 feet of the one end is a solid floor barn. So the solid floor is all our receiving pens. So when cattle first come in, they get filled up on hay, processed, and then typically moved out to one of the other sites or to one of the pens, slatted pens that are here. The decision to build this the way we did, this one is 5 years old. The previous slat barn we built was in 2012. The difference is here, we made the side walls a foot higher and then the cement walls a foot lower to let more cross ventilation in to help improve the air. And the decision to go to slats versus solid floor, it basically come down to quality of manure, labor, and straw savings. The difference in the cattle comfort, we feel that with the rubber on these slats, we're getting close to the same cattle comfort as we would on the straw bedded packs. I feel it was worth the extra cost to build the slatted floor facility, yes. I wouldn't necessarily say I'd want all my facilities to be slatted floor just for the type of animal that you're putting on a slat versus the type of animal we're putting on some of these solid floors. I like the flexibility of having both systems. This barn is split up into 20 different pens within here. We're using this center alley both to feed the cattle or to move cattle. So if you need to treat one or pull one, you just bring them out into the center alley and take them up to the handling area. And the same when we go to ship cattle out of these pens or bring them up to re-implant or revaccinate. We're using the center alley to move the cattle up and down, which is an easier way than a lot of our older facilities. So the top here is obviously an open ridge. Opening extends up for 2 feet. Somewhat of a small roof above that, so that lets a considerable amount of air to be drawn up through there to help with the air quality. Now it does let some snow in. If you had to come in here 2 weeks ago when we had a snowstorm, there was 2 or 3 inches of snow in this center. This barn, with it being a slatted floor barn, there's a 10-foot pit underneath us to store the manure. This center feed alley gives us extra storage of manure underneath us, along with an alley to move the cattle. So to us, it made sense to be feeding on that same alley, utilize that we've got the bunks all covered inside for easier bunk management, along with we needed the alley to move cattle and underneath the alley for manure storage. You can see here the cement is covered with a rubber mat. We did run this barn for a couple years without rubber because the reality is the rubber costs more than the slat itself underneath. So we're running close to $10 a square foot for the rubber. You can see the texture of it or the thickness when I just peel up this corner. So there's the cement underneath was grooved, somewhat grooved. So that's what they were on before we put the rubber down. The rubber is slightly tapered to help with the cleaning action, that it's the moisture runs off of it down the openings. And you're just relying on the traffic of the animal is basically pushing that manure down through to the pit underneath. The pit underneath is basically split into 4 separate pits within this barn. So when you go to take the manure out, we agitate it, which basically stir the manure up. But this is a raceway, what they call a raceway system. So every 12.5 feet underneath us, there's a divide wall within the pit, and then an opening at the end of that divide wall. So you're pushing that manure through the series of these walls, and then it returns back to where you started. So all that manure has to travel through the propeller on the agitator to mix it up, and then we can pump that manure out once it's mixed up. That alley where we're pumping out of is 2 feet deeper than the rest of the barn. So yeah, you're relying on the agitator to push that manure around, mix it up, and push it to where you're pumping out. You'll never get the barn completely empty. Like you'll likely still have a foot of manure in the bottom of that pit when you're done pumping out. So here there's basically one water bowl supplies 2 pens. So it's on the divide between the 2 pens. Similar idea as the other barn, that 1 water line to each water bowl. The difference in this is that we have actually a cistern in the one end of the barn. So we have the capacity to hold in this barn about 35,000 gallon within that cistern. We're pumping out of 2 wells into that cistern, and then 2 pumps coming out of that cistern, one supplying each side of the barn. But they're all capable of crossing over, that if one well goes down, the other one will feed it, and the same if one pump goes down within the cistern, the other one can supply the entire barn until we are able to repair. So on the slats here, we're not starting any cattle. I'm not saying I never will start calves on the slats, but at this point, we're just finishing cattle on slats. It's maybe an old school train of thought. I still like those calves on a straw pack. I mean, if you get a calf that's not feeling well and you're bedding them every other day or whatever, at least that animal has straw he can chew on just to keep that rumen going. So that's a big reason we don't start calves on slats. Also, the length of time on a slat, I'm not sure how healthy it would be for the animal's joints if he was on it for 300 to 350 days. So this is our main handling facility here, both for this barn and for incoming cattle. They all come through this handling facility. So you can kind of see the flow of cattle here, where they will be brought up along that far alley, and either through the foot bath or else through the second alley. It's set up kind of as a bud box approach, that they come around the end and then back into the alleys. We also have gates there to kind of run it as a tub. Certain times that the bud box maybe doesn't work the way you want it to, or the person running it isn't running it the way you want it to. There's also the scale here. If we're re-weighing cattle, as they come off the scale, they can go around and out the back alley through the foot bath. So the foot bath, when we built this 5 years ago, we decided to put it in to see if we could help improve foot health. We're using copper sulfate. I would say over the past 5 years since installing it, our foot health has improved. That being said, there's a lot of other variables at play that I'm not 100% sure that the foot bath to what you would attribute all the improvement to, but I'm positive it has helped us out some. So when we installed the foot bath, in order to be able to use it in the winter time, we've got heat in the floor on either side of the foot bath and in the foot bath. That heat continues around right up the alley where they're working cattle here. So the surface that the guys are working on is actually, the floor is heated along with the propane heater above them, that it's a little nicer in the winter to work with. So the curtains, the sidewall curtains on these barns are all controlled automatically. They're split into zones that you can set the temperature on. Each zone's independently, and the curtains are controlled by these controllers here. So you can set wind compensation, temperature. You can set humidity with these controllers. We don't have any humidity settings. It's basically just setting it according to the inside temperature along with wind direction and strength of wind. There's basically a little weather station or wind vane on the roof of this barn. The other barn, there's actually an independent sensor for each zone above the curtain that controls the wind compensation. You're not typically adjusting it every day. It'll, if you get to big temperature swings, yes, you want to change that inside temperature, but outside of those huge temperature swings, you don't have to change it that often. When it comes to sourcing cattle, the majority of them are Western Canada based. With the new rules coming in regarding e-logs and transportation regulations when it comes to hauling cattle from Western Canada down to Ontario, we've, I'd say this fall, we've seen an increased length of time for the cattle to arrive here because of that. It's more stress on the animal, and I'd say we've seen the effects of that. Cattle health this fall has been a bit more of a challenge than it has been in previous years, and I would attribute some of that to these new regulations that are leaving those cattle on the truck longer than necessary, in my opinion.
It'd be great to see grandchildren come home and be involved in the business and carry on, but that's a decision they have to make. If they want to be here, there's opportunity for them to be involved, but they've got to want to be involved and feel like they're part of it, and That could change the direction of the farm too, who would know?